It's your friendly math tutor, Miss C, here to talk about the slopes of lines. Before we get started exploring the 4 different types of slope, let's talk about how we read graphs. So we read graphs like we read books. We read off from the left side of the page to the right side of the page, and that is exactly the same way that we read graphs. So let's look at this positive slope. So remember, we're reading from the left side of the graph to the right side of the graph. What do you notice about all 3 of these lines? They start low and they end high. That is how you know they have a positive slope. You could think of this as it's like walking up a hill. So if you start on the left side and you are walking up a hill to get to other points, that means your line has a positive slope. Now, a negative slope is the opposite of a positive slope. Have a look at these lines. So you might notice that as we're reading the graph from left to right, we're starting out high on our graph and then we're getting really low. It's like we're skiing down a mountain. So if you could think of your line as you read from left to right as it's like you're going downhill, that means your slope is negative. All right, let's look at the other 2 types of slopes. So the first is a zero slope. So have a look at these 4 lines and tell me what you notice. Did you say all 4 lines are completely horizontal? That's right. If a line has a slope of 0, they're completely horizontal. There's a 5th line on this graph that also has a slope of 0, and that line is the x-axis. All right, so what exactly is happening so that we end up with a 0 slope? So essentially, the slope formula is rise over run, is how we say it. And the rise represents the y values. So what is happening is our rise is 0, which means that all of our y values are the same. So if you look at the 3 coordinate points I've included, notice that all the y values are -1. When we use the slope formula, we get 0 when we subtract those from each other. So that means we're rising 0, but we're still running something, and that's why we end up with horizontal lines. Now, the undefined slope. Let's have a look at what these graphs look like. Okay, so these are 4 lines with undefined slopes. What do you notice? If you said they're all completely vertical, you're right. And like the 0 slope, there's a 5th line that has an undefined slope here, and that line is the y-axis. So what is happening so that we end up with an undefined slope? Well, the run in this case, so that's the slope is equal to the ratio of the rise divided by the run. In this case, the run is 0. You may remember we can't actually divide by 0. So that's why our slope is undefined, because it's not possible to divide by 0. Here's a surefire way to tell if your slope is undefined. All of the x values have the exact same value. So in this example, you could see it's -1 and -1 and -1 for the x values. That tells you that your slope's going to be undefined. Okay. Also, if you were to plug it into the slope formula, you'd have a 0 in the denominator, and that would give you a clue that you can't really graph this because you can't divide by 0, and that gives you an undefined slope. All right, so those are the 4 types of slope. The big takeaway, remember, we read graphs from left to right, and that's super helpful to remember when we're looking at graphs and determining slope. Thanks for joining me. Make sure to subscribe for more math videos. And till next time, remember, you've got this.